Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Fumi, and today I'll be sharing with you a quick tutorial on how to cover your styrofoam cake dummies with fondant. Why do we need styrofoam? We use styrofoam for different things as cake artists. For me, I use it for training, I use it for display cakes, I use it to try on new designs. There are also some designs that you see out there that are actually difficult to carve out using real cake. We bring in dummies for some fake tears sometimes. Another thing we do with dummy, which is very popular, you have some clients that the ones the very big cake in terms of look, but their guests, they don't need a lot of cake. Their guests are maybe just 100 or a few guests, but they want the look, so you can mix the dummy cake with the real cake so that they have that look, but then the budget is slightly lower. Do you understand? So those are some of the reasons why we use dummies. To work with dummies, unlike real cake, you don't have to ganache, you don't have to trim, you don't have to crumb coat. It's so simple and straightforward. I hope to record a video using a real cake in upcoming videos. I'll work on a cake so that you see how I cover real cakes. But for today, we're working with styrofoam dummies. To hold my fondant to the styrofoam dummy, I use vegetable shortening, so it makes your fondant stick to your styrofoam dummy. The first time I was trying to work on a dummy, I used water and it was difficult for me to get my dummy back. After a while you want to change the design, and as I was trying to take out the fondant, the dummy was pulling apart. So just get a vegetable shortening and you'll be fine. So I have my fondant here. This is a white fondant, and I have my smoother. That's fondant cake smoother. I like to use cornstarch to dust my table. Some people prefer to use icing sugar. Whatever works for you, it's all fine. Then this is my styrofoam dummy, and I'll be rubbing some shortening all over my dummy. Don't do that until you're ready to start working on your fondant. So I'm just going to generously rub. I'll be using paneling method. I use paneling method to cover all my cakes, and paneling method means that you're going to cover the top, then you go over the side, unlike the blanket method where you just go all at once. So what I'm doing here is I'm rubbing some shortening generously on the top of my cake. After doing that, I'm going to start rolling my fondant. The texture of your fondant is actually very important for this particular method. If you're working with paneling method, you may require to work with, I like to work with firm fondants. So if you're buying, there are different fondant brands out there, and if you're buying fondant, you want to check for brands that are actually very stiff. What I have here today is not so stiff, but because I've been doing this for a while, I can still work with it. So I'll be covering the top of my cake. All I need to do is to dust my top surface with some cornstarch. This is my rolling pin. It's a wooden one. You can use whatever rolling pin you have. Make sure you have kneaded your fondant properly. Then you roll, you make it into like a circle, because I'm working with a circle dummy first. So you roll your fondant. For the thickness of your fondant, I can't really say. I'm going to show you what it looks like. If you're starting, if you're a beginner, I advise you work with something a little bit thick, but by the time, with time, you're going to get better on, you'll be able to work with thinner fondant. So this is about what I have, not so thick. I've already creamed the top of my dummy, so I'll just place this over the top of my dummy like so. Then you kind of hold it down with your smoother. The dynamics is different when we're working with real cake. Like I said, I hope to record a video for a real cake. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim off the excess fondant. One style I recommend is to work upside down. I've done this over the years and I always prefer to work upside down, so I flip my cake upside down. So I'm gonna get a sharp knife. I like to use a knife. You can use something like this also. Well, I do not recommend you use a pizza cutter. I just don't find it easy. Sometimes I get to damage my cake. So you can use something like this or a sharp knife. You're gonna hold your knife straight up, resting on your cake. If it's a real cake, you don't need to support, but because I'm using dummy, I want to support it a little. So you hold it close as possible and as straight as possible. My knife is resting on the dummy, so it's very balanced with the dummy. Then you go tightly like that all around your dummy. Then I flip it back so that you see where we are. So you have a sharp, straight top. Everything aligning straight up with the side of your cake. So I'm gonna set this aside, then roll out my side panels. A 7 inches cake, the circumference of your cake is about, just work with 23, it's 22, but you had one extra, so we have 23. And the height of my cake is 6 inches. So I can work with 7 inches or 6.5 inches by 23. That's what you need to roll out. So now I'm gonna do the side panel. I have my fondant here. You want to make your fondant look like a ball. This fondant is not soft and it's not firm. It's not exactly the firmness I need, but we can still work with it. So you have to make your fondant smooth like a ball first. Because I'm working on something long, I'm going to make it look like a sausage, and this is what a sausage looks like, so that you can have something long. So you're not starting like the way you started for the top panel. This is a side panel. I work with cornstarch. You can work with icing sugar. I don't work with shortening at all. I work with either cornstarch or icing sugar. And because of my space, I'm working with a smaller rolling pin now. So I'm just going to roll. Rolling fondant is actually an art that you have to practice. You want to be in control of how your fondant is going. You're trying to do something rectangular, so you don't want your fondant roll looking like a circle. So you have to direct your fondant to look like a rectangle. So if you have some pockets like air trapped in bubbles, you can just get a toothpick and just I'm using needle here, but you can use a very pointed pin and just poke them out. Then you continue to roll your fondant. People ask me, how do I know how many kg or how much fondant to put on your table? I think that will come with practice. I can't exactly tell you, but it's always better to have more than enough than trying to have like an exact amount of fondant. So I'm going to use a tape to check. I said I needed 23, so this is about 23, 24, and I need like 6. So I'm almost there. So I'll just make this straight. You want your fondant to also look even in terms of thickness, so you're not having the fondant thick on this side and flat on this other side. You want it to look as even as possible. You can achieve, practice makes it perfect. The more you practice, the better you get at being able to control the shape of your fondant and the thickness of your fondant. It's just going to come over time if you don't have the machine. So you have to just keep doing it till you get it. So with the head of a smoother, you can kind of, flatten it out so that everything looks really of the same thickness, kind of. So I'm just using a smoother to make it look better and be sure that the thickness are the same throughout. So you put the same amount of pressure and you just kind of smoothing out your fondant. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my knife to make it straight on the two ends and on one side here. I don't really bother trying to make it a perfect rectangle. I'll trim this when I get over to my cake, so I don't bother about the side. As far as I have the length I'm looking for, which is 23, please always add extra. When I measured my circumference, it was 22, so I added 1 inch extra. Then the height of my rollout is also more than 6. To lift your fondant, because this fondant is not the thick side, so people leave their fondant to rest. I don't do that. They leave their fondant to rest so that they can lift with their hand. I lift my fondant with a rolling pin like this, and this is how I do that. Make sure that you have enough dust, flour. Make your rolling pin not wet. Just dust some cornstarch on it. Then you roll like this. So this is how I lift my fondant easily. I prefer to use water for this part, and I do exactly that. What I'm doing now is what I do when I'm working with a real cake as well. So you flip your cake like that. You can also work with a board that is a lot wider. The reason for working with a wider board is so that your rolling pin can conveniently stay on top of your board like this. So because this is not a real cake, it might be tricky for you. You might need somebody to help you put a weight on top of this so that your fondant is not the dummy is not shifting. Working on dummy, like I said, is going to have to, because dummy is really light, you might have it shifting and you don't have control over it. So I like to place a weight on this to help me secure it in place. That's because I'm working alone. If you have somebody around, just have them put their hands on top so that it keeps the dummy in a position that you can work conveniently. So I'm gonna go around my cake like this. Just go gently over your cake. Make sure it's touching the board. Make sure it's touching the board. So this is what I have. Then I get my smoother and I try to use my smoother to secure it properly. Dummy has its own trickiness because it's not heavy. It might be a little bit tricky, but having someone around to help you will make life a lot easier. So this is what my back looks like, and with the head of the knife I'm just going to cut all the way up. This is what I have at the back. I just cut through. I overlap and I cut through. So you cut sharp and clean like that. Remove the inner one, then you close it. With a brush, you can just apply some water right here. Then, mind you, my dummy is actually 2 dummies. I don't have the 6 inches tall dummy, so I'm using 2 dummy. I secure it together with a skewer. It's actually 2 smaller dummies placed on each other. So I'm seeing if you look at it closely, you can almost see the joining, the gap between the 2 dummies, but it's okay. I'm going to try to smoothen as much as I can. So now that I have my fondant properly secured, I can now try to smoothen my cake properly. So the sharp edge that you get from flipping upside down is the effect of using your smoother against your cake on the cake board. You have a very nice edge from doing that. This is how I trim my excess. People have different way of doing this, but I find it easy to just touch my hands as a guide and go. Some people like to do this and just go straight. You can work with a turntable if you find it easy. But because my cake is not heavy, I don't think I need a turntable. It may make it more difficult trying to use a turntable. So you trim off your excess like so. So you can look at the cake and see that the sharp edge is just there. So I'm just going to finish this up. One advantage or one thing I like about a paneled method cake is the sides are straight, the bottom here is straight, and you have the sharp edge. Unlike the blanket method where you tend to have some folds, here and there, you don't have the folds in this case. You have a very clean bottom. You can decide not to put anything here like a border because it's clean and looks good, and the top is super sharp.